We make decisions all day long. And while we do it frequently, we don't always do it as well as we could. Would you like to make better choices for yourself, for your team, for your organization? To do that, we need to better understand how we make decisions so that we can make them more effectively. That's why we're here today. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you are listening to this podcast, you could be joining us in the future for live episodes on your favorite social channel. You can get access to that information and therefore interact with us like people are doing right now. We're going to put some of those comments in a minute by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn to get connected in to all of that. Today's episode is brought to you by our new book, The Long Distance Team, Designing your team for everyone's success. You can learn more about this book and how it can help you design your team and create a more effective organizational and team culture by going to longdistanceteambook.com. And with that, I want to bring in our guests and let you see their smiling faces if you're watching on the video. And let me introduce them, and then we will dive in. All right. So our guests today are Dr. Jim Loehr, a world-renowned performance psychologist, co-founder of the Human Performance Institute, and author of 18 books, including co-authoring the national bestseller, The Power of Full Engagement, which I highly recommend. Jim is well known for his individual work with top flight athletes and Olympians. He holds a master's and doctorate in psychology, serves on several specific scientific boards, and is a full member of the American Psychological Association. And he has been inducted into 3 halls of fame. Dr. Sheila Ohlsson Walker is a behavioral geneticist. And until I started reading their book, I didn't know that existed. She is a senior scientist at the Institute for Applied Research in Youth at Tufts University, a visiting assistant professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Education, and an adjunct assistant professor of pediatrics at the George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences. A former professional tennis player, she earned her BS in finance from the University of Colorado Boulder and obtained her certified financial analyst designation and had an investment career as a portfolio manager. Then she got her doctorate in, as I said, behavioral genetics from the Social, Genetic, and Developmental Psychiatric Center at King's College in London. And they together, if you're wondering why these two extraordinarily smart and good-looking people are here, because they co-authored a book called Wise Decisions, a science-based approach to making better choices. That's why they're here. And I'm so glad to have you both. Welcome. Thanks, you guys, for being here.
Thank you for having us, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, for inviting us. We're excited to do this together.
So I'm gonna ask the first question, and while you're answering, I'm going to sort of share some of the comments that people have on the screen that people have put in as to where they're located. So I guess my first question for you is, what led you to work together and to write this book? Sort of tell us a little bit about how it came to be.
Well, Jim and I both share a background of trying to understand what helps people grow into the best possible versions of themselves. And our first conversations were really around a lot of the things that we write about in this book. We're also involved in a nonprofit called the Youth Performance Institute, a takeoff on Jim's Human Performance Institute, but focused on the younger generation. And so we wanted to write the book because not much was written in the decision-making space that's kind of organized the way this is, and also to create program and potential curriculum for the Youth Performance Institute. What we know is when kids learn early from adults in their lives, it's stickier, it's longer lasting, it's the biggest time for lasting habit and behavior change and mindsets that stick for life. So just really help us grow into the best versions of ourselves. And that's how the book got going.
So kids are going to learn from adults. The only thing is we want them to learn more effective stuff, right? That's really what we're about here today. So Jim and I had all three of us had a chance to chat briefly before we went live. Jim and I had a little longer chat, and one of the things that Jim that you said was that we make lots and lots of decisions, which of course we do. Either of you know from your research, I'm just curious, how many decisions do we make a day?
So, that's the question that we really looked at for quite some time. And, we can literally make 10 to 15 decisions that we're not even aware that we're making them in absolutely less than 10 minutes. And they just fly by and they just happen. What Sheila and I really were shocked, all the books I've written, I'm always trying to find what I think is maybe the most important thing that could be addressed that could actually make a difference in people's lives. And all the roads led to decision making, because this is something that not much attention has been directed to, certainly by the scientific community. And yet we both believe that it may be the most important competency that human beings possess to have the lives they really want to have and to actually live the best version of their lives possible. And so we decided to put decision making under a microscope and to look at what do we really know from a pretty evidence-based perspective about this process. Where in the brain does it occur, and what can we do to help really children, adolescents, and parents, teachers, coaches really make a step forward in their own decision making and be representative of great decision making for all the people they influence. So that was really the motivation for the book.
Yeah, and go ahead, Sheila.
Oh, just one add on to that in terms of the number of decisions that we make. There is research that shows that it's sort of 10 to 15 every several minutes or but there's also research showing that it's tens of thousands. And there's the decisions we know we're making and the decisions we don't know we're making that are just automatic. And so we're making decisions all the time, whether or not our conscious minds are making them or not. But there's a tremendous amount of malleability built into the human system. The science of epigenetics and neuroplasticity, the more we practice behaviors over time and thought patterns and being aware that we're actually making a decision, the more that we're going to be apt to pause and take a step back and really act rather than react, which is the whole aim for the book, to give us the ability to act rather than react, particularly in heated moments.
And there's a lot that you talk about in the book about this idea of sort of training ourselves, right? This using neuroplasticity, my words now, to our advantage to create the systems and the habits, if you will, for us to be more effective at doing that. We're going to get to all of that in a second. But because this is something that we all do all the time, and and yet we haven't gotten much training or instruction on how to do it better, I'm guessing that you would say there are some myths. Like, are there some myths that we generally collectively hold about how we decide, or are there myths about what we should do or are doing to make better decisions? Anything there that you want to talk about?
Well, I think I'd start on that one. I wouldn't call it as much a myth. It's not something that's commonly thought of about our bodies and our emotions in making decisions. So it's really the mind-body system. We talk in the book about having a 360-degree data set, this kind of comprehensive data set that informs us in multiple ways. So we have a much larger data set with which to make a decision. The emotions are our first guidance systems when we're little people. They're incredibly strong. And sometimes our bodies can tell us, have a strong gut feel about something that we may overlook to focus on the rational or the intellectual element of the decision. But the important thing to know is that it's all important. And so really, particularly with big decisions, taking time to step back, think about what our bodies or our intuition may be telling us as well, and our emotions can inform the kind of intellectual, the cognitive data in a very powerful way. Because if the goal is to make a decision we're going to look back on, years or decades from now and make a decision that is aligned with who we want to be, how I want to show up, our purpose in life, just the human being we want to be in life, it's important to integrate the multiple sources of data to come up with the best solution.
So I would say, one of the big myths is that good decision making is just a process of getting really the facts right and being logical. And the fact is, as Sheila iterated, it's really not the case. And some people believe that they just trust their gut. You just go with your gut, and your gut's going to figure it out. And what all the data that we have accumulated in the book suggests that this is a process that has to include all of our realms of intelligence, the rational, the emotional, the intuitive. All of these play a role in making good decisions. And there are decisions that are habituated, that are made so automatic we never think about them. And some of those are great and some of those are bad. I mean, we've got into the habit of not having breakfast, got into the habit of maybe not eating properly in preparation for really important events. We just kind of snack. There are all kinds of things, but you get into those habits, you don't think about it, but they impact the way in which you're going to show up and perform and be the person you'd most like to be. And so we're trying to kind of set the record as clearly as we can in a direction that's doable. But because most people haven't thought about it that much, we're trying to bring it out into the open and make it very accessible, both the automatic decisions you're making and to slow that process down if we need to, because maybe they're not in your best interests. And then those that we really think are great, let's habituate those. Let's make them automatic and preserve that energy and all that deliberation for something that might require more, conscious thought and deliberation. So we're complex creatures, and we need to address that. And the most beautiful, the most important capacity we have as human beings is to make a choice. And without that, there isn't much in life. So we really believe this is the centerpiece of a person's life, and the trajectory of their life will follow their choices for better or for worse.
This is a very light conversation we're having here, everybody. We're not talking about anything too important or anything like that. Jim is sort of setting the table. Like there's a ton that we could talk about here, and we won't get through all of the great stuff in this book. We are talking with the authors of Wise Decisions. There, I'll let you see it. Wise Decisions, a science-based approach to making better choices. One of the big ideas in the book, and don't get too excited, folks, if you happen to be a Star Wars fan, but one of the big ideas of the book is this thing you guys call YODA. So what the heck does that mean, and why should we care?
Well, YODA, and we love that YODA brings around the emotional sense of kind of wisdom and taking one's time, and all the things that YODA kind of embodies. But it stands for Your Own Decision Advisor, and we all have a YODA inside of ourselves. Our inner voice, the one that speaks to us, it informs us for better and worse, how to make meaning out of situations, how we should feel if an event happens. The meaning making piece is huge, but our inner voice is messaging us all the time about how to make meaning and feel about events in our lives. What we have is the ability with our kind of neurally plastic brains is to upload YODA and make concrete, put kind of bumpers around the kinds of decisions that we make, so that we can act with intentionality. And the little decisions all add up to the big decisions. So it's important to think about all of them as we go across the board. But this inner voice, YODA, is something that we all have inside of us. And it's an entity that can be trained to really guide us to align who we want to be in life and the decisions we make with what we care about the most.
So it's like having you even liken it to this, I think, at some point in the book, that it's like having a really wise coach or it can't. Well, is it safe to say? And I'll ask you this, Sheila, and I'm going to go to you, Jim, with a question. But is it safe to say we already have one of these? We all have a decision assistant, decision advisor.
Yeah.
The question is, how do we make it more effective? Correct?
That's correct. And is your YODA an inner coach, an inner asset, or an inner adversary? And it can be both. And this goes back to, I know this is a leadership business podcast, but the voices that we hear inside of our heads are the voices of the adults we grew up with as little people. And often these just fly in below the radar screen and embed. So we may be making decisions and have attitudes and mindsets about things that we're not even aware about it because we haven't unpacked them. They've just kind of come through the epigenome. There's this wonderful quote, don't worry that your children aren't listening to you, worry that they're always watching you. And this is how children learn. They model behavior and it becomes automatic, with just like brushing your teeth under the radar screen. We just act a certain way. So our book hopefully can help people unpack some of that as well, to think about, are these really the kinds of choices I want to make? Is my YODA ready for an upgrade?
This is why my wife says to me all of the time, everybody, there's your dad again, right? There's your dad again. So Jim, Sheila talked about the inner voice, and we all sort of know we have one. But one of the things that I found most fascinating in the book is that you all say we have two, or that we can have two. Can we talk about that a little bit?
So we have what we call, in the book, we call it inner voice one. And inner voice one is the voice that just kind of starts accumulating without a lot of conscious thought, or you begin to develop the voice that represents kind of the accumulation of all the voices that have had an impact in your life. Most importantly, those that have maybe the most important authority figures. And those might have been pretty raw, pretty not really that wise in terms of the messaging that they gave you. And when you really looked at the way in which that voice, inner voice one, which is untrained, is coaching you, it's not doing a very good job. It's actually, it's more of an, almost an inner, it's a battle that you're fighting with yourself, and you're also trying to deal with the outside world. So you're looking for ways to take that inner voice one and make it this wise repository of information and knowledge that you can trust. We can't necessarily trust inner voice one unless we vetted it carefully and looked at, what is the messaging that I'm getting? Is this really a great coach for me? Right. The most important coach you'll ever have is the voice that no one hears but you. And if that voice is really not contributing significantly to good decision making, it really can be a tragedy. And so inner voice two is a trained version of inner voice one. And it really is it's an asset that will be with you for the rest of your life. And you're always trying to get it to be a little better trained, a little better advisor in all aspects of your life. And eventually you go, I can trust my inner voice. I really believe it's pretty solid. And because you've really vetted it and you're very aware of it, and if it gets off track, you just say, stop. I'm not really following that advice. And but when we've worked with folks over many years with this concept, it truly is remarkable how much better they feel about themselves and how much better they navigate through the storms of life.
One add-on to that, we developed something called a YODA code. And our YODA code is really 5 or 6 words that describe who we most want to be, our very best selves, what we strive to be in our lives with the people we love, with our work colleagues, and so forth. And so developing a YODA code and thinking about it, we have a list of words in the book to choose from, but choose your own words. But posting those in highly visible places, especially places that can be, stressful. Like I've got 3 teenage boys. I have a sticky note up in the kitchen window with my YODA code, because that's where that's the YODA training gym. And we can remember those things that are the most important to us in a sticky moment. And it is really just repetition, 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 myelination, and kind of reinforcing ways of thinking and being that become automatic over time. So the visual cue is incredibly important for strengthening YODA.
Right. So that's, I mean, in many ways, once you help us understand in the book what YODA is, and that we have one, and that it is trainable, then much of the rest of the book is about how to strengthen it. And you just gave us Sheila, a very practical way to do that. And I'm wondering if you guys could give us a couple of other practical ways that we can work to strengthen our YODA.
Well, if you really think about your YODA as something that it's a competency that you're always working to improve, just like just about anything in life that you really want to be extraordinary in. If you want to be extraordinary in anything, if you want to have an obsession to really be the best you possibly can be, this should be it. In your ability to make wise, thoughtful decisions, because everything really is going to be determined by the kind of choices that you make. So every single situation you're in, every stressful situation you're in, every high performance venue you are in, every time you're having a conflict with someone, an emotional kind of battle, stop and think about, I can improve my ability to make better choices in this moment. And the way you do it is you reflect on really as Sheila said, the most important kind of template for me to follow in my decision making. And so we have a number of things like, something as simple as, what is your ultimate mission in life? Where do you really want to end up in life? How do you measure a successful life for you? What is the ultimate scorecard that at the end of your life you're going to use for determining if you really had the life you really wanted to have at the highest level? And, little things like looking ahead 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 years, where is this going to take you if you extrapolate this into the future? How important is this really in real time? Or maybe I'm worrying too much about this and there isn't a whole lot I can control about it. So let it go and reserve that energy for something that you actually can make a difference in. So there are a number of things. One of maybe the most powerful is what I call the tombstone exercise. And Sheila and I have worked with this for some time. And that is trying to figure out, how do you take YODA and use YODA, the wisdom of YODA, to get you to go home in life? Everyone wants to go home at some point. And home simply means you end up at the end of your life where you wanted to end up. So we take you in the book to the very end of your life, and you get to choose what you would like to have inscribed, carved on that tombstone, that you normally don't get to choose that. Someone else chooses that for you. And it's a lot of times just made up to make people feel good. But you get to choose it, but those are the words that represent the greatest success possible in your life. And you just can't get those by wanting them. You have to earn them. So you go backwards. You start at the end and then you move forward to try to determine, what do I have to do now in terms of decision making that will enable me to end up in what I believe is my most important imperative mission in life. And we call that getting home. And getting home is what YODA is all about.
Being a wise guide, right, to get us there.
Wise guide.
I can add one more thing to that also, which is that it all starts with awareness. Again, being aware that we're making decisions. And what factors into this in a massive way is our emotional state. So back to emotional intelligence, being aware of where we are. My dear friend and colleague Mark Brackett runs the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, has something called the mood meter. And there's an app of the year that he developed with the founder of Pinterest called Why We Feel. And it helps us get granular about how we are feeling. It's a wonderful app. It was one of the Apple apps of the year this year. But understanding where we are from an emotional standpoint is vital, because if we've had a terrible night's sleep, if we've had a stressful day, if we've have eaten food that's not doesn't agree with our bodies, so forth, we can be in a state that is not, it might benefit us to really take a pause from making a decision in the moment and being granular about what those emotions are, given that emotions are really kind of the, if we're all to go through life wearing sunglasses, kind of clear glasses on a sunny day and kind of blue lenses on a kind of a lower mood day, being aware of what those things are is key, so that we can factor that element into the decisions that we're making around self-care and around decisions that impact others as well.
So we learned that from just looking at people's, bad decisions. When they've made their worst decisions, they often made them in an emotionally hot place. They were, either really positively, they were excited about buying a new car. They just got overwhelmed with all the excitement and ended up buying a car they never could afford. Or they were hot with anger, rage, frustration, envy. And so we really have to be really careful about the moments that we choose to make decisions that are going to be perhaps really impactful in our lives or the lives of our children. And what Sheila said is so important about the developmental aspect. These decisions that we're making, the most powerful force in making decisions in the lives of children are watching their parents make their decisions and seeing how those decisions play out. And if the parents are making them when they're angry and frustrated or depressed or sad, that's why what Sheila said in Mark's research, understanding what emotion you are experiencing in this moment and how it interfaces with great decision making can really be a game changer.
So what they're telling you, everybody, is, or what they're telling Kevin is, if you have to make a big decision, don't eat a pint of ice cream first. Although I really like that ice cream. So there's so many things that we could unpack here, but one of the things you both keep say, you're both talking about, but you haven't used this phrase. I love this phrase. I talk about it all the time, is the idea of being of reflective consciousness. So even though you've kind of been talking about that, you haven't used that word, or that phrase. Could one of you just unpack that a little bit, because it has a huge impact on our ability to strengthen our YODA?
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so it's so interesting when we look at our subhuman ancestors and all the animal kingdom. They are aware, and they're aware that certain things affect them, and they're looking for anything that's survival based, something that's positive or negative. But what's happened with the brain of Homo sapiens, something magical has happened. And it's very perplexing. Biological science has never really been able to answer this. How does this 6 inches between our ears, 3 pounds of meat between our ears, produce the ability to observe itself, to actually be conscious of the fact that you are conscious? And what that enables us to do is to actually tune into what is my private voice saying to me? What kind of messaging am I getting here? Is this really something that I would say to someone that I really deeply cared about in the same situation? Is this really good advice? Is this a great advisor? And what's so unique is reflective consciousness enables us to observe how our own brains are working, how our decision-making process is either flawed or actually has some real important processes involved that actually ensure almost always that I'm not going to do something that I'm going to regret because I was just too quick off the cuff, and I really didn't do the process that I've been learning throughout all of these training sessions. I'm now getting pretty good at this. So without reflective consciousness, we're pretty much determined. Our genetic basis of endowment in where we've come from is pretty much going to determine our outcome. but reflective consciousness gives us, and this is what Sheila spent with epigenetics, has spent so much time looking at the interaction of our ability to rise above that genetic predisposition, and this reflective consciousness can make an enormous difference in terms of how it plays out in the real world.
And I would add to that, reflective consciousness it's a whole brain state. It involves our default mode network, the one that's kind of on when we're off. These are the, we're in the shower and we just connect the dots on some big thing that we've been trying to solve for a month. It's where sort of wisdom percolates up from, and creativity and ideas happen. And it is on when we're off, when we're daydreaming, we're out in nature, and doing things where we are not focused on a concrete task like picking up our phone or writing a letter, what have you. And so it's important to devote time. We have writing exercises in the book, just journaling exercises. Journaling is incredibly powerful. And the research on journaling and actually physically writing with a pen on a piece of paper in a journal is powerful. It's a much more of a whole brain activity than keyboarding. But in order to access our reflective consciousness, which is an incredible, as Jim said, one of the incredible assets we have as human beings, is metacognition, to think above ourselves and think about how we're thinking, being in a peaceful place and finding that space, devoted time, whether that's, mindfulness meditation at a certain time of the day, again, being out in nature, time where we can really just sort of let our minds go and let these concepts come together and synthesize in a way that can guide us.
Yeah, I think I appreciate you both sharing that so much. I've got a question that's not about something that's not in the book. Sheila, you mentioned earlier, this is a podcast for leaders. And of course, as leaders, I have long said that as we become better humans, we become better leaders, and vice versa. So that's one of the reasons why I have you here. And yet I want to ask a question that's a little bit more leadership based. And that is knowing what you know about how we make decisions, how can we help our teams make better decisions? Like, how can we use our YODA to help, or our collective YODA, if you will? How can we use what we're talking about here to make better decisions as a team?
I think, Kevin, that is a great, great question. I love that question because it really makes it very practical in the real world. And if a leader really opens this particular area of skill and says, I really want this to be something we all are trying to get better at every day. I want you to really think about the decision. I want every week to think about a decision you've made, and I want everyone to be involved in understanding how you made that decision. And I want you to look at the great decisions you've made and the ones that are not so great. And is there any comparative analysis here that's worth looking at? And what about the decisions this company has been making? And what might we learn from that? And this, as Sheila said, this 360-degree data set, so often the decisions that are made that are really not really playing themselves out very well, so often they were not really vetted properly. And, sometimes the big decisions can't be made in an hour or 2 hours. It might even take a week. A divorce, moving to another city and taking another job. It might take at least 30 or more days to really look at all the aspects of this and to make sure that you are prepared. But I think as a leader, you represent this to your team as maybe the most important dimension in your leadership. And we're all going to pay attention to the decisions we're making, even the decision you're making about, just treating your valet attendant badly because they brought the wrong car.
Right.
Or, just dismissing someone because you don't really think they deserve the attention because they're not that important. Those are decisions. Some of them are automated, but I think it's important for us to create the right environment. We need to make sure that we are doing this aligned with our deepest values and beliefs and hold ourselves accountable for the decisions we're making and for the choices we're making and not making.
Yeah, I think connecting it to that very practical last thing that you said, Jim, connecting it to our organizational values and beliefs, and that was
Exactly.
a huge piece of that sort of decision criteria, if you will. Sheila, it looked like you wanted to say something else.
Yeah, for sure. And that, precisely what Jim said, and just adding on to that, emotionally intelligent leaders are better leaders. And so when making decisions that involve people on a team, and a team, a team is not a linear thing. It's not ideally, great teams are not 1 + 1 = 1. Great teams are 1 + 1 = 3, 4, 5, 6. It's a kind of a, logarithmic function. And people, at whatever role they're in within an organization, want to work with people who they feel care about them. And so, when making decisions, being thoughtful about the emotional side of things, empathy, non-judgmental, from a personal standpoint, kindness, just bringing in those deep core human values, particularly if it's a decision that involves, has a ripple effect out to the team. That is a vital piece of how a leader can show up, because when we feel felt as human beings, we bring a different level of ourselves to the game. We just do. And there's a great quote: "Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." It's the same for adults. When we give people our full presence, and we're there with them, and really trying to, and curious about if they have we have some kind of a decision, and they're not happy about it for whatever reason. Listen, be curious, don't get defensive. Try to understand the rationale. Take time to process if you need to. You don't have to respond right away. Take the time you need to synthesize all the information and come back in a manner that has you holding onto your YODA code, walking your talk with those high and deep values, and acting rather than reacting.
We also found that the intersection of those decisions and the kind of energy that you have, which connects very closely to emotions. But we are first and foremost creatures of energy. We're reservoirs of energy. And the kind of energy that you're in, the energy state you're in at any moment, clearly impacts your ability to make good choices. So if you are very tired, if you're exhausted, if you have what I would call very low or minimal energy, and you're trying to make a very, very important decision, it's probably not in your best interest to do it now. Get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, that's why mom and dad said sleep on it, right? So I want to shift gears on both of you, sort of rapid fire from each of you. Sheila, you first. What do you do for fun?
Oh, I love to play tennis. I love to climb mountains. Any kind of racket sport I pretty much love.
How does a tennis player feel about pickleball? There's my question for you.
Well, I'm on the USTA Sports Science Committee, and pickleball is cannibalizing a lot of tennis courts.
Yeah, I know. That's why. That's probably a whole nother episode.
Well, there's a whole other, racket sports are special. Like I love seeing people out there active. Pickleball is easier to pick up, and people are out there having fun hitting balls. They're socializing. If we think about the things that keep us healthy over time, our brains especially, it's exercise, people, and a sense of purpose and belonging. Those are the three major factors. And so getting out there, whether it's pickleball or tennis or doing something active with other people, is just incredibly important. But I love activity. I like to adventure. I've got 3 teenage boys, as I said. So, and I love the people I get to work with, like Jim.
All right. Jim, what do you do for fun?
So I used to play a lot of tennis. Now I play more golf, and golf is almost addictive as tennis, not quite. But I love to write. I just, if I don't write something every day, I'm writing in journals, and I'm writing something. I'm always curious. I have a very curious mind to see how things work. I love journals. I love reading, and then trying to integrate something that might be meaningful. I have 7 grandkids and 3 sons. So one of the greatest things I can do is have all kinds of activities, whether it's hiking, whether it's golf, whether it's going out. They all play tennis. I mean, I love doing things with family, and but I have to be active. I'm a nutcase. If I'm not doing something, I am climbing the walls. I got to do something, and I got to push the envelope all the time.
So, Jim, I know that though there is one other thing that I know that you do that we may not think of as being active, except maybe with our brain, and that is reading. So, Jim, tell me something you're reading right now.
Well, if every time Sheila's over here, she sees this stack of books. I'm reading books all the time. I'm working on another manuscript, but the goodness paradox. It's this very strange relationship between virtue and violence. How are we the most virtuous species and also the most violent species when you look at our history in human evolution? And it's by Richard Wrangham. He's an anthropologist at Harvard, brilliant researcher in anthropology. And it's a great book, and it's very disturbing in many ways and perplexing. That's why he calls it the goodness paradox. How can we be so good to others and also treat our own in ways that are absolutely unthinkable?
Same question for you, Sheila. What are you reading?
I'm rereading The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. He writes about the Stoics, just ancient wisdom. And it's, it really is a lot of basic precepts that we include in our book about, emotions and what we think we see versus what really is, the stories we make up. And then we have choice, we have agency, and we have choice. And I just, that's the optimistic story science tells us as well. But in reading this book again, I love these ideas that are timeless ideas that have been with us since the very beginning. And now we have all this cool biosocial science to back it up.
There you go. So now the question you've really wanted me to ask you from the very beginning, where do you want to point people? Where can people learn more about this great book? What do you want to tell them about where to go to get more information or to get a copy of the book?
Well, you can, it's pretty much available everywhere. It's on Amazon and most bookstores. Was just released December 8th. And we have, we're both Sheila and I are on LinkedIn. My website is jim-loehr, LOEHR.com. And Sheila has a very active LinkedIn network as well. And there's Sheila's to get all the letters in there, but I'm going to let you do that, Sheila.
A lot of letters. Thank you for putting it up on the screen. There it is. It's the original Swedish version of Ohlsson, OHLSSON, but Sheila Ohlsson Walker.com. And some of the things that I've written aside from the book are up there as well around developmental science and youth sports and optimizing human potential. That's the game Jim and I are in.
Perfect. Along with tennis, apparently. So now I have a question for all of you who are watching or listening, whenever that is. And that is the question I ask you every single week, every single episode. And that is, now what? What are you going to do with this? Maybe what you want to take from this is something about connecting to how this all relates to your emotions. Maybe you want to write your own YODA code. Maybe you want to think about some of the ideas we talked about how to make better decisions with your team. Maybe you want to be more clear about your reflective consciousness. I don't know what that might be for you. Those are just a few of the things that I wrote down as we went along. But I can tell you this for certain, that if you don't choose to take action with what you learned, it's not going to stay around and you won't get the results that you want. That would be a wise decision. I want to thank Jim and Sheila for being with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you guys. I've been looking forward to this conversation very much.
Thank you, Kevin.
It's been perfect, Kevin. Thank you so much for having us. I hope it was helpful.
And everybody, I'm sorry.
I appreciate the fact it's so great that you've read the book, know the book, and the questions that you got into were really kind of the core of what we believe are the most important things in the book. So thank you.
You are very welcome. Everybody, if you enjoyed today, I hope that you will like and share, and you know how to do all those things if you're watching the podcast. If you're on with us live, share it with your social network. Everyone here would benefit from you doing that, especially those people you share it with. And I hope you invite someone to join us and come back for another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast.